Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports. And we're basically one of a handful of pollsters who isn't attached to a major media organization running a psyop on you. And we're also one of, I think, only two people who is willing to open up about all of the numbers on YouTube. So if you haven't yet, please take a moment to subscribe to us on YouTube or Rumble because I think we have some pretty important information. Now, the question we're getting asked over and over again in the last few days isn't how did Kamala Harris's stunning and brave speech at the Democrat National Convention impact the race? It's actually, what's the impact of RFK dropping out on Friday in a stunning speech and then endorsing Trump, and not only that, joining his campaign? That's what we're going to cover today. But first, I want to show you a few ways that you're being lied to. Here's the Real Clear Politics aggregate. And notice, again, all of the blue. We've talked about how Harris is up 1.5 points nationally. And this is just a straight average of all the pollsters that meet Real Clear Politics standard. This still represents her doing about 5.5 points worse than Joe Biden did 4 years ago, but it's pretty crazy because nobody, in my opinion, we certainly didn't expect her to have this kind of a surge, and it's not at all what we've seen in our numbers. Back about 6 weeks ago when Joe Biden was in the race, Donald Trump was winning by, 3 to 5 points, and in our latest polling, which we talked about in our last video and absolutely massive polls that we conducted last week, Donald Trump was still winning by 2 points plus or minus a little bit, and up almost 1 point in a massive combined swing state poll that we did. So, Joe Biden in our numbers dropping out and Kamala Harris just swapping out for his place, and even the DNC really didn't affect the race that much. But if you look at the Real Clear Politics aggregate, it looks absolutely nothing like our numbers. Look, immediately Kamala Harris had, a 1.5 bump up, and then this crazy run up. She's gone from basically where Biden was at, 44.5, up to 48.5. That's a really high number for her. I mean, in our numbers, she struggles to get to 46 and 47. And then Donald Trump in our numbers has been pretty comfortably at about 48, 49, even 50%. Here, Real Clear Politics had Trump losing over a point. And that's crazy because in our polling, he really didn't lose anything at all. But let's stop in on our dear friends 538. Now, this is not a polling aggregate. This is some fancy black box model that, in my opinion, is just an excuse to lie. Because if you recall from Real Clear Politics, here they had Harris up 1.5, but here they have Harris up 3.6. So whatever they're doing, they are basically adding about 2 points from where the Real Clear Politics straight average is. And it's because obviously they curate the data. I mean, they booted us out of the aggregate, and we can get into that in another video. But what it essentially boiled down to is they didn't like the fact that we associated with some people that they don't agree with politically. And maybe it came from the top down on ABC News, Disney. Who knows? But what I want to point out is look at all the underlying data points. These data points are, I believe, after they applied some kind of adjustment to all the different polling results. And look at the blue dots. Kamala Harris got up to 52 points here. She had a couple of 52. Donald Trump had numbers. Look at this. He had a couple polls in the last few weeks where he was in the high 30s. Let's go back to the Real Clear Politics aggregate. I'm looking at the Harris column, and I'll be honest with you, I don't see any 52s. There's one. I mean, looks like all of her numbers are kind of 46, 47, 48, kind of like where I said they were. And Donald Trump's, I don't see any numbers at all in the 30s. That's crazy. These numbers, They look a little bit lower than mine, but of course, the industry will tell you over and over again that they have a hard time polling Trump supporters. Don't believe it, folks. Trump supporters actually answer when we call them on their landlines. They actually answer on our online panels. Maybe it's because we don't have a toxic brand. I don't know, but I have to correct because we have too many Trump supporters. But here's also the kind of lies you're seeing from other members of the media. Here's the Hill breathlessly reporting that Harris is leading Trump by 7 points in a poll. And I can tell you, the narrative created by this headline, I mean, it was going wild on Twitter. The tweets I saw had millions of views. Vice President Harris holds a 7-point edge over former President Trump nationally in a poll released Friday, marking the latest gain for the Democrat presidential candidate as the general election approaches. The survey from Fairleigh Dickinson University found Harris leading Trump nationally with 50% support to 43%, while 7% someone else. Trump and Harris fare equally well with voters from their respective parties. Yeah, okay, I find it. Let's skip ahead. Pollsters noted race or gender played a large role in pushing Harris's lead. When voters are asked to think about race or gender, Harris's lead grows significantly, while support for her and Trump are virtually tied when they are not made to think about it. Now, I don't look at every single pollster and every story written about every poll. So, I mean, hat tip to somebody in my Twitter replies who brought this to my attention. But if you look at what Fairleigh Dickinson did, they created a push poll. And, I'll actually credit them. There's some interesting stuff in here. They talked about how Trump is winning big among men who say that they're mostly masculine or have strong masculine traits. And Harris is winning among people who do not say that. Pretty fascinating. But what they did was ask people, do you support Trump or Harris? Then they asked a bunch of questions about the candidates' race and gender. And then they asked them again. And that's where they got this huge surge to 7 points. So really, this poll didn't at all say that Harris was leading Trump by 7 points. But the Hill knew that when they wrote this headline. And the people on Twitter spreading this around really didn't care. So let's get into RFK. And I think that this poll we did last week, the massive combined swing state poll, is a really good thing to look at because RFK is basically dropping out in the battleground states. He's going to stay on the ballot in many states nationally. And this is just an incredibly large poll. The margin of error is almost 1%, just a ton of data here to look at. This does represent the data set that probably gives us the biggest view into what actually will affect the 2024 race. So what I have here is the two-way matchup question. And I think from a high level, I've seen a lot of analysis about this. Some of that analysis I agree with, but when I think about RFK, there are 3 places where new Trump support may come from. We're going to look at the first one first, and that is from people who in the two-way say not Trump, not Harris, but some other candidate or not sure. Now, these people, the some other candidates, most likely know their third-party candidate that they're going to vote for ahead of time. And so I think this is the most important one to look at first. 3.4% said some other candidate, 2.1% said not sure. When we look at these people together, that's 5.5% of a possible increase for Trump. Thing is, Trump's not going to get all that. So what we're going to look at is incremental places where Trump might gain over Harris. Now, when we look at the multi-way matchup, those people who said other or not sure, these results are filtered for just those people. Those people in the second question went about 7.5% for Harris, 7.5% for Trump. In my opinion, those numbers roughly cancel. And you'll have to, excuse me, we just have to make assumptions in order to have some kind of analysis. If you disagree with me, you could be right. Just leave your thoughts in the YouTube comments and maybe it'll be worth rerunning the analysis. But really looking at this, when Kennedy drops out of the race, most of the people that might go to Trump are coming from people who say in the multi-way that they would vote for Kennedy. So that's only 37.5% of these filtered out data points, which brings that 5.5% down to 2.1%. Now, we also have how likely are you to vote in 2024, and not all of those people are going to vote. Making another assumption, I said, well, let's take all the very likelies and about half of the somewhat likelies. That brings the 2.1% down to 1.6%. And of course, maybe some of these people will change their likelihood of vote since maybe their favorite candidate dropped out, or maybe their favorite candidate endorsed somebody else. I don't know. But again, it's all we have to go on. Now, let's take a look at the issue question to get an idea of who these people are. They seem like just kind of independents because economy is most important to them by far, way more than among all likely voters. Border really doesn't seem to matter that much, but violent crime still gives a pretty good showing compared to where the national numbers are. They really don't care about abortion. The education issues is non-existent. I'd say these people are leaning slightly conservative. And what we also have to use as a data point is the generic congressional ballot. If the elections for Congress were held today, would you vote for the Democrat candidate or the Republican candidate? 43%, 43.5% say Republican, 15.7% say Democrat. And again, we're looking at just the incremental pickup for Trump. So it's almost 30 points here. And you could say, well, some of those not sures are going to break for Trump. Some of them are also going to break for Kamala Harris. If they broke 50-50, then it would cancel out and essentially there'd be no impact. So just with the 43.5 and 15.7, it brings that number down to 0.4%. Maybe Trump does better with the not sures. Maybe it could get to 0.5%. Half a point, not a very big number, within the margin of error. But again, that brings Trump's lead from here, it's only 0.7 points. That brings it up to over 1 to 1.1 in the battlegrounds. That's hundreds of thousands of votes. That's a really big deal and may impact the race. Now, the second set of people to consider when trying to figure out what kind of pickup Trump might get from this RFK stuff is the people that initially said Trump or Harris in the two-way and not other or not sure. Out of these people, some people maybe didn't know or kind of forgot, but when they hear the multi-way matchup and they hear Kennedy's name, they change their vote. When filtered out, this is what the Trump-Harris voters look like in the multi-way. And you can see that 2.7%, and this is a lot of people, so that 2.7% is a real and big number, say they vote Kennedy. Oh, Kennedy, cool. I'll vote Kennedy. But let's take a look at who those people are. They say they're very extremely likely to vote, 90%, using the same assumption we did in the previous set. That brings 2.7% down to 2.5%, still respectable. But a different pattern emerges when looking at the issues. Economy is a lot less important to these people, although border security is a few points more. They're way more interested in climate change and abortion, less interested in global conflicts and war. I'll be honest, though, it's hard to tell who those folks are just by that pattern. But here we have, again, the generic congressional ballot, and these people basically are split. Democrat to Republican, 48.6 to 46.8. I mean, I could do the math, but it incrementally really isn't a big number that Kamala Harris is going to get over Trump. And here's their 2020 vote. So, yeah, they're basically split, Biden or Trump. So doesn't look to me like Trump is going to pick up any of these RFK voters at all. So we're talking about a half a point pickup. But here's what I think is going to impact the race most. And that's the third set of people. Those are people that, maybe knew Kennedy was in the race, maybe have been disengaged, have kind of been watching Trump, kind of been watching Kamala Harris. Maybe they made up their mind, maybe they didn't. But what they saw on Friday was spectacular. If you have not seen his speech yet, you absolutely have to watch it. It is packed full of facts. And the descriptor I've been using is that he basically curb stomped Kamala Harris. I mean, the fact that we're talking about the health and lives and death of children, and she wouldn't even pick up the phone. That is incredible. And then his appearance at the rally was, I think it just blew people's minds. I think that people are fed up of our lack of unity in the government. And when they see a real chance for unity between a former Democrat and a new portion of the Republican wing, I think that'll capture a lot of people's attention. And now all of a sudden, you really have two heavy hitters campaigning for MAGA and the Trump movement. To me, the people that Trump is going to pick up now are people who are seeing something new and having their minds changed. And I think that is by far the biggest of the three ways that Trump might gain support here. But before I leave you, I have one more quick thing to look at. And everybody who's been following this channel knows exactly what this is. This is all of the nightly Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump individual night matchup results. And again, they're smaller than a normal poll, and so the margin of error is larger, but they show a very clear trend. And this trend, again, if you've been looking at the other pollsters, looks nothing like what those people in the mainstream media are putting out. Now, I will say Kamala Harris had an initial bounce, and then Trump did pretty well, and then it tightened some. And then really, up until this most recent data point, Trump and Kamala Harris were tied, and those 3 days were during the DNC. Again, the last data point we had was tied, but it had Trump up 0.6 if you were using unrounded numbers. But here we have Donald Trump back up to a 1-point lead as of data Sunday night, which would be our first night of data after the RFK endorsement. If you'll notice, this is the best night that Trump had since the 19th of August, and Kamala Harris is still doing pretty well at 47%. The summation of RFK support and other candidate not sure is going down now. We had some nights where it was 8, then 6, then 7, then 10, and 7, and now down to 6. I think we'll see that number continue to creep downward. And if what I said is correct, some of those people who are part of that 6% will be incrementally moving to Trump and not Kamala Harris. But we'll have to wait and see. I think this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday will be the most interesting data points. And as always, we'll be putting this chart out. So if you want to get it as soon as it drops, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Rasmussen_poll. And I'm also there posting as well. And I get a little bit more into the trends and data. So I think there's some good stuff that you can see as well. Like the fact that Donald Trump is winning among anyone who says they're a part of an organized religion, but Kamala Harris is winning big, even bigger than among Democrats, among atheists, and she's also beating Trump handily by like 20 points among people who say they're agnostic or not sure what their religion is. And then Donald Trump is also winning with every human being in America, except for people who say they rarely or never attend church. It's like some kind of weird holy war going on. So hit me up at Mark_R_Mitchell. And if you have any thoughts on this video, make sure you post them in the YouTube comments. That's where I'll be checking. And thanks for watching.